Hey, Joe.
So we had this idea of creating a short video that captures some of the work we're doing in the Pathology Innovation Collaborative community.
So we interviewed a number of our active members of the community so we could share this with you.
Welcome to Voices of PIcc.
PIcc is a collaborative community. What group do you represent?
Hey. So I'm Jidesh Vittal, Senior Program Director for Digital Health and Technology at Medical Device Innovation Consortium. And of course, digital health and technology is a kind of broad field. At least in my current portfolio, I liaison for Pathology Innovation Collaborative Community, PIcc. But my other project areas include cybersecurity for medical device, computation modeling and simulation, and I work a lot on medical extended or augmented reality and so on. So a lot of activities happening at MDIC on digital health and technology area.
Amanda Lau, I'm the managing director for Visio Farm, and I've really always been on the commercial side. So I've worked for companies that are driving the innovation of digital pathology forward. And as I mentioned, I've been with Visio Farm now for almost 11 years, but I've spent most of my career, over 20 plus years, in digital pathology. But on a personal note, I'm a super passionate advocate for digital pathology. I truly believe in what we're working to drive forward.
Well, I'm a community pathologist, and to start with, so I'm just like 99% of our community group, which are pathologists working in the community, the field outside. Yeah? So I don't work in an academic center. So my perspective on all the things that I do is the community pathologist. So in the middle of the world, somewhere in the hills, in the mountains, doing everything: GI, brain pathology, lung pathology, and trying to do the best of patient care they can.
My name is Brittany McKelvey. I'm the Director of Regulatory Affairs at Friends of Cancer Research, which is a patient advocacy organization based in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I'm a biomedical regulatory health science expert, and I have been involved in pathology, digital pathology, so to say, since 2011. When I was working on getting whole slide imaging devices on the market, getting them reclassified from class 3 to class 2. And thereafter, I mainly worked on life sciences and also getting more innovation to the market, to patients.
PIcc is FDA recognized. Our FDA liaison is Dr. Brandon Gallas. How did you get involved?
Well, I think it starts with how I got involved in digital pathology. Back in 2009, we had a panel meeting at the FDA about the regulatory pathway for digital pathology. Up till then, I'd mostly been in radiology and imaging, and even a little bit of algorithms to detect things in images. And that's kind of where my contribution to that panel meeting came from. We had just seen mammography go digital and come onto the market. And we thought that there was a lot of similarities to bringing the microscope onto the market digitally as a digital imaging system. And so as I was helping with that conference, I kind of pivoted towards digital pathology more in earnest in my research area as well, and started attending conferences to understand the research in this space and the challenges in digital pathology, and get to meet the people that are innovating and involved. And I actually created a WSI working group to try and figure out studies and tools or phantoms or measurement devices that could support the whole coming to market of digital pathology. That's kind of my job, is to try and create tools and study designs to help industry get to market and share that as research outputs. But I created a working group, had some meetings where we talked about these sorts of things. This is still a pretty small group with some industry partners and with some collaborators from government that I knew in this space. And then that really kind of launched my research in digital pathology. It gave me direction of what would be good to do. And as I started doing my research, more and more people started asking me about it as I put myself in that community. And there was actually lots and lots of groups that were asking me questions about my research. And really, it turned into the need to put them in, all these people asking me questions, into a new working group of sorts. And that's when I met Joe and Esther Abels and we talked about creating a group we called the Alliance for Digital Pathology. And then after a few successful, a year or two in that group, the CDRH had a program called the Collaborative Community Program, and it seemed like a good place to give a little more governance and structure around this alliance, and that's where PIcc came to be, and the charter was written. So all that really helped us to put a little more structure and a little more formality around our discussions in our group and our meetings, and so I've been happy to be a part of this group and became the official liaison of this group and to the FDA, where I report back on things that are happening, and I get to contribute and hear what's going on.
MDIC is the official convener of PIcc. Can you tell us a bit about MDIC?
So MDIC is a nonprofit public-private partnership, the Medical Device Innovation Consortium. We have just celebrated our 10-year anniversary, and we are a partnership primarily to advance the regulatory science for medical device stakeholders. So as you can imagine, our consortium members are, of course, medtech industry, diagnostics manufacturers, and regulatory bodies like FDA, MHRA. And of course, we interface with other nonprofit organizations and patient advocacy organizations. When I said we are a consortium or a partnership, I also wanted to really highlight that we don't work on advocacy or lobbying. We purely work on the pre-competitive field on advancing regulatory science.
PIcc is a collaborative community. What do you value about the community?
And I think firstly, just saying that collaboration itself is key. We need a space and a convener like PIcc to really be able to come together across academia, industry, as well as patient groups to help to harmonize these methodologies and work towards the use of pathology to really help patients.
I believe that when you collaborate with all different kind of stakeholders, think about payers, healthcare providers, regulators, patients, but also industry, that if we do that, that we build a strong foundation, and that's where we can connect all the different crucial elements in digital health to deliver precision medicine to patients.
PIcc is basically the first venue that I saw that brought these ideas together. You know, I don't think anybody was talking about regulatory science or how do you move forward on technology. And this was the first forum that I've seen it. In fact, I haven't seen other forums. I mean, I'm president of API or ex-president or something like that. And you don't hear this conversation much. You know, we talk about the technology, we talk about, I call them technophiles. We talk about how great it is, but we need to talk about how to actually, you know, be able to move forward thoughtfully. You know, what are the consequences of these? And that thought about, you know, what are the consequences? What does this mean when it rolls out? How do we evaluate it? That's a very thoughtful conversation. I think, you know, PIcc really brought that out as part of the conversation. When you look at the website, it has tons of topics on different technologies that are outside of just digital path, just, you know, molecular, and, you know, you bring up very important conversations.
You can, you know, you can collaborate with your entire network, and then you use that to be kind of an architect where you lay the foundation to create synergy and expanding the brain power of everybody to serve the common good.
What I really loved about it was that it brought together all types of different stakeholders, including patient advocacy groups, the FDA, of course, and we all had a very common goal, which is to drive digital pathology adoption and innovation forward to the market, to have impact to patient care, but to do it in a more agile way while still maintaining the very important foundation of safe and effective use.
Just to reiterate, MDIC is the official convener for PIcc right from its inception. Now we are into officially the third year of our existence as a collaborative community recognized by FDA. Now, the folks who are not familiar about PIcc, this might be interesting. You know, there are a lot of associations specifically focusing on maybe pathology or digital pathology or other aspects of diagnostics, right? But there are topics and areas and needs over and beyond that is been actively dealt by the community or these associations or societies. Now, PIcc, by the nature of the collaborative community, you know, fills that void where how are we going to address some of the advanced topics or upcoming topics in a relatively fast pace, particularly from the lens of regulatory science. That's the main theme of PIcc here. We are not trying to duplicate work elsewhere or compete with what's happening, but provide that platform to discuss a lot more advanced topics or new topics in this field of digital pathology in case of PIcc. And MDIC, we are already convener of 2 other collaborative community, and we are really excited about the whole concept of collaborative community, as well as particularly in this particular case, the PIcc.
It creates a new way to interact, and that will benefit everybody. So we have to look at it as a holistic, holistic view of the problem. It's all interwoven, everybody's involved, all the different stakeholders. And I do believe that implementation and applicability of innovation is key. And that's where we need to collaborate. That's where we need to work together.
PIcc is a regulatory science initiative. We interact with a variety of organizations. Can you describe how your organization relates?
I think it's good to know that the CAP has an advocacy office in DC, and we work very closely with our main headquarters in the Chicago area. We're involved in regulatory science in a number of ways, but we do focus our attention on those activities in the pre-regulatory space. These activities include participation in external communications, diverse stakeholder groups, and standards organizations. We engage with several external communities, including PIcc and the pharmacogenomics communities, and we work with numerous standard setting organizations such as HL7, SNOMED, LOINC, IHE, DICOM. In fact, we're the primary secretariat for both the IHE and DICOM pathology domains. Our stakeholder groups include working jointly with other specialties to develop proposals that address issues that are of interest to all of us. These specialties might include DPA, Association for Pathology Informatics, infectious disease groups, and others. We are always looking for regulations to evolve in a way that promotes high-quality laboratory testing and patient safety. Since pathologists really are the stewards of the laboratory as well as the laboratory data, it's important for us to be involved with numerous organizations and federal agencies.
Is how I look at it is that I would like to support activities in the entire product development lifecycle, and then also using translational medicine to expedite early market access to improve personal health care. And my mission is making this innovation and also all these emerging products accessible to all patients everywhere across the universe.
Helping to manage and a consortium of mostly pathologists. And I don't do this alone. I get a lot of support from clinicians, from other pathologists, statisticians, and the group which I co-chair. I think the word co-chair is important because nobody can do this type of things alone. Is called, in lay terms, the TILS working group, and in official terms, the International Immuno-Oncology Biomarker Working Group, which is actually nothing more than just bringing people together from the same background, mainly cancer, with some specific expertise in pathology, oncology, and also statistics, and trying to work out, and again, with the perspective towards community pathologists, about how can the research and the biomarker development of the immune system, and the TILS is just one of those variables, how can that help inform those pathologists in their patient care?
You know, much like PIcc, Friends has been really a convener of experts as well, and in a bit of a way to tackle regulatory science challenges in the field of cancer research and treatments. And so over the last several years, we've established different harmonization efforts in the NGS diagnostic space, first focused on tumor mutational burden, or TMB, and then now on homologous recombination deficiency, HRD, to review disparate methodology and biomarker assessment, and a really harmonized methodology to support aligned biomarker measurement and use. And as digital pathology is continuing to be leveraged for biomarker assessment as well to aid in drug development, as well as patient selection for treatment of patients with cancer, you know, harmonization in this space will really be paramount as well, which we've begun to tackle at Friends and with PIcc, and why these types of stakeholder collaboration groups are so critical.
PIcc is working on digital pathology and AI. What do you consider the key pain points?
Is that there are many pain points in digital pathology. The biggest one and the common pain point is that everybody's looking at why hasn't it been adopted yet? And I think what we should look at is what is the real issue, because you often hear it's unclear regulatory path, it is reimbursements, return of investments, interoperability, patient perspective, what I observe is we are tackling all these problems, and we do that in a great way, and also in pieces. For example, we now have the reimbursement codes. Even 30 more are coming up. Those will be discussed in May. We have AI machine learning framework that the FDA and the MDIC have been working on, and the PIcc has been involved, as well as the Digital Pathology Association. We're working on DICOM, working on standards, and so much more.
Technologies moving forward, but specifically as we see pathology and digital pathology continue to evolve, I think there's really a significant promise in use, but there's also the concern of it potentially becoming a little bit of a Wild West with little alignment across these different platforms and technologies, and an unclear understanding of best practices or interoperability. And so having this collaboration to collectively be able to set boundaries, to discuss alignment, to really harmonize across these platforms and across industry will really help the field move forward in a meaningful way that can really spread this innovation, but also make sure that we're all moving forward in the same way and in an aligned way.
And there is this new emerging trend of new technologies, and AI and machine learning is just one of them. And we need to ensure that this development is not dogmatic. So when you start to hear or read about manuscripts on AI and machine learning, certainly a few years ago, it always starts with saying how bad pathologists are. So we are not good at grading, we can't score pleomorphism, we can't identify mitotic figure, we don't know our gland, how to define a gland, etc. So actually we are very bad about it. So that's why we need AI. Now, the emerging evidence indicates that also different AI tools also have variability when you compare them to each other. And sometimes, and that's unpublished evidence, which I hope you will get to see, hopefully in the second half of this year, the variability between different AI tools on the same variable is sometimes even bigger than between pathologists on the same set for a variety of reasons, and good reasons, technical reasons. So it's not a judgment, good or bad. It's what it is. So the role of organizations like the PLSCC and in partnership with the FDA and partnering with groups like the one which I'm co-chairing is actually to develop that framework and develop reference materials, for example, so that in the real world where it's inevitable that there will be a variety of assays used on AI for HER2, for TILS, for ER, for Ki-67, that we ensure that if two different hospitals, hospital A and hospital B uses an AI tool for a biomarker, but a different one, that the patient is not affected significantly.
In general, in healthcare, I see three, like the delivery of care, that is shifting. We're going more in towards platforms usages, and this needs, of course, interoperability, but also data within digital health. So what I do see is that already in the past, lots of companies have been using platforms, but in healthcare, it was different for many reasons. There it was more fragmented, it's complex, and it's more regulated, I believe. So I think also, having said that, there are also some hurdles with regards to incentives and return on investments. They're not really fully aligned. We're recognizing that, especially after the pandemic, after COVID, that platforms are really needed for delivery of care, but also to manage data. And if there is somewhere a data-rich environment, it's definitely here in healthcare.
Well, hell, this is a really important field. How do you make progress when you introduce new technologies? How do you get all the different bodies? Because one thing I discovered about myself, I consider of some of my better qualities, herding cats is something that I've discovered about myself. And when it comes to regulatory, there's a million cats. People say I'm chefs, I call them cats because they're really hard to herd. And, because of the CLIA relaxation, the continuation of the CLIA relaxation past the pandemic, you learn a lot about cats. I have a cat too, by the way, but only one cat.
PIcc and regulatory science in pathology. Why is regulatory science so complicated?
I don't necessarily say regulatory science is complicated, but there are few challenges, I would say, in a sense that the field by itself is very interdisciplinary in nature if you consider medical device stakeholders. So you need to bring a very diverse pool of scientific, technical, and policy folks together and apprise them of what the things are evolving. So that's the natural challenge here in terms of regulation, right? So it's partially the lack of awareness or a lack of access to the information. Once you start understanding the science part of it, science is usually rooted in facts, right? So then it becomes naturally easy. And that's the role organizations like MDIC is trying to play, where we bring the stakeholders. For example, one key component of regulatory science for medical device and diagnostics in this country, US, is US FDA. Now, FDA is coming and clarifying, discussing few things over and beyond what explicitly stated in one limited guidance. And MDIC is providing a platform to do that, the engagement or those conversation between a wide range of stakeholders. So that's the way we can, overcome the challenges associated with regulatory science.
Because regulatory science, you got to use a diverse variety of components of your brain. You have to use soft skills, politics, then you have to use the technical. There are very few people in this space that can do that, and it's really challenging. And I think I've gotten an appreciation for it. I've never considered myself a regulatory expert, but I've learned a lot.
PIcc is planning an in-person meeting. What are some of the topics we could tackle? Any ideas?
As a community, you can imagine the community when working together or working particularly in person, there'll be a lot of good and engaging conversation, discussion, and ideas, and that's kind of natural. During the pandemic phase, we kind of lost that ability to come together as a group or as a community and brainstorm a lot of ideas. We have been, as PIcc, we have been really successful even during the pandemic phase with regular monthly steering committee meetings or stakeholder meetings and additional project meetings. But in the past, we recognized that, or we realized that in-person meeting has got its own benefits. So this will be maybe the very first PIcc specific in-person meeting. We did have one meeting in Arlington, Washington, DC metro area just before pandemic. It was really, really productive. So now in this meeting, we are trying to build on what we have already established in the past 3 years. There are a lot of areas, a lot of regulatory changes, advancements, some legislative changes, and a lot of good ideas. And we wanted to hear from stakeholders. We wanted to invite a lot of new stakeholders into the field and get their perspective. And ultimately, we will try to get one regulatory science or maybe a couple of regulatory science projects scoped and implement through the PIcc platform. So I'm really excited. Mark your calendars, June 27 and 28 in Washington, DC area.
But I believe that we need a holistic approach from all of us. And I also understand it's easier said than done, of course. So what I would like to discuss is how can we create with this group of people, with all these different stakeholders, an overall strategy to get there and then tackle one by one. And I think that can be done at that meeting.
I think there might be several that might be worth reviewing or thinking about. Just by way of background, one of the newer committees of the CIP is the Artificial Intelligence Committee. And given all the hype and development around AI and pathology, one thing we might want to consider in PIcc is developing strategies for engaging with the FDA and others around the inclusion of user responsibilities in the AI framework. Of course, the lab is regulated by CLIA, but maybe PI should be discussing what could or should serve as a standardized or standardization model for AI. PIcc might want to discuss if there's a need for some sort of framework for ML model usage that defines good practices and due diligence in validation and managing the ML models that'll be used for clinical patients. I think that, as you might guess, the AI committee is focused on many of these aspects, but it would be good to get a wider perspective from the community. And PIcc has a very diverse group of people that I think would be very interested and would be very beneficial in talking about this. I also think PIcc could develop a strategy for establishing best practices for implementation, management, and quality control of digital AP systems. We have a Digital Path committee at the CAP who's working on these issues, and we have a center guideline online for digital pathology. But I think it would be important for PIcc to be involved in some of the digital pathology implementations issues also, so that we can learn from each other on the same kind of issues, what the diverse opinions might be. And I know that we have a trainee education working group in PIcc, but I was wondering if maybe we should expand that to help identify the knowledge gaps among working pathologists, especially community pathologists, who may soon be responsible for evaluating and verifying the performance of digital pathology and/or AI systems.
The classical way of getting a biomarker in daily practices has always been there is some type of academic research. You gain knowledge, you define a clinically important research question, you do a clinical trial, the trial gets positive, then you get the regulatory approval, and then you come into the real world. And then you have guidelines, and then you have national healthcare authorities who tell you which are the drugs and biomarkers that you need to assess. And that's actually the flow so far, which has been. And we have understood that this flow, which is not bad or good, and this is the flow that we know, so it's not a judgment. It has certainly its limits. Why? Because this flow assumes that the biomarker evaluation done by a field pathologist in a centralized manner of those studies, which can be academically driven studies or can be industry-sponsored studies, we assume that if the trial gets positive, that biomarker evaluated by just a field pathologist in a very centralized and very clean setting can be extrapolated to the thousands of pathology labs worldwide. That's the assumption. We know it's not true. We have seen it with PD-L1. We have seen it with a lot of other biomarkers. And this narrative creates a lot of confusion.
Well, that's a tough question, but I think what's really bearing down on us is artificial intelligence and machine learning tools using digital pathology images. That's just one little niche in this whole digital pathology landscape, but I think there's so much research out there that's how we know what's coming to the FDA eventually when someone tries to commercialize it and bring it to the clinic. So we definitely see that there's lots of use cases and tasks for which algorithms are shown to be quite successful, at least in the research setting. And then the real test is to see how to, what are the needs to get it through the regulatory process to create in a marketing submission.
I do think we should look at it working more from the perspective on value-based care. So to answer your question, I think what we should be focusing on is really what is then the clinical utility, because we can get great technology, great tools, but then we need to understand how do we implement this and apply this so that we can bring value to patients.
PIcc is very interested in innovation in diagnostics. What will be the most significant changes in the next few years?
Somewhere a data-rich environment, it's definitely here in healthcare. So I do believe that we see patients also asking more and more about, for example, home-based care models. And that's where we do need interoperability to make sure that we can share the data, we can coordinate, we can have shared workflows, we can have analytics. And that's where you then can also shift more and more towards that value-based care, what we just touched upon on, that the FDA is also looking more into patients. You see it also within CMS, you see it in the government. There are rules out there, and it's also from the government, it's being supported to have interoperability. So I think when we do that, when we have this platform, when we can create those type of layers. And with that, we can use the right format for the right patient or for the right user, for the right consumer, as long as we understand who owns what type of data, how do they control it, how do they use it, do they know how to use the actions that come out of it. So I think that provides us all what we need.
Of best practices or interoperability. And so having this collaboration to collectively be able to set boundaries, to discuss alignment, to really harmonize across these platforms and across industry will really help the field move forward in a meaningful way that can really spread this innovation, but also make sure that we're all moving forward in the same way and in an aligned way.
And this narrative creates a lot of confusion. And actually, what I think what we need to do as again, community-driven people, and I include also academic pathologists and industry in this community because we are one big community after all. What's in the name? Is that in order to inform the regulatory authorities on which may be the best model to avoid risk to the patient, it's actually a different model. And the model is, I think, is we should get a biomarker first in daily practice. By convincing the community and clinicians that the biomarker is worthwhile to document with all its limits. So we need to develop that framework in which we assess all the limits, all the difficulties, the good things and the bad things and the ugly things of that biomarker, but in a very honest and transparent manner, and then create a community so that everybody starts to do it. And this is something that we are starting to achieve slowly by the TILs. As an example, we can have this discussion with other biomarkers also. So that once the whole community understands the good, the bad, and the ugly things of that biomarker, then we should develop the trials using local testing so that we can evaluate the variability of this local testing in a clinical trial with a very strict quality assured environment. And we can do this. That's our job, to define this quality assured environment. So that when the trial gets positive, the real world practices will probably be very comparable to the trial practices and the results. So the challenge would be, and this is something, and this is what we are doing with the working group, and again in a very slow and very controlled manner, is to develop that framework in order that once the trial gets positive, that the real world environment matches as close as possible the trial environment, so that this transition is very smooth as we visibly can. That's a bit how we tend to develop our studies. Informing, so not advising, it's just informing the regulatory authority, because we all want the same thing, is avoiding unnecessary risks to our patients.
Tools. PIcc may want to discuss if there are significant gaps in how responsibility and liability for the operation of these systems should be divided between developers and users, or at least an understanding of that, and how safe and clinically useful performance can be demonstrated as well as maintained. And I think the demonstration and the maintenance part are very important, especially when it comes to AI. At the CAP, we're very vested in the goal of interoperability in laboratory medicine, and we work closely with the FDA and others. We've been active in SHIELD for several years and have a representative on the SHIELD steering committee. One area of interoperability that we are very interested in understanding and exploring with others is the difference between technical and clinical interoperability. Interoperability for clinical use would mean that the context required for the interpretation of all the results, for example, the standardization, harmonization status of the test, is transmitted along with the result so that it's clear for clinicians when results from different locations, whether they're comparable or whether they're not. This is something that I hope SHIELD can help with, but I think it might also be a topic for the PIcc, given the diversity of this community.
Well, yeah, that's exciting. Pandemic is kind of not entirely in our rearview mirror, but in terms of work, it kind of is in our rearview mirror now. And I'm excited that we'll be getting together and talking about issues and all the issues related to the enforcement discretion decisions that the FDA had during the pandemic. You know, we're deciding on what to do with those as we're putting the public health emergency behind us. And so that means a lot of go or no go on some devices and practices, and hopefully go or no go on projects to demonstrate that some of these devices can be used remotely, or whether it's remote sign out that I know is a project within PIcc, or you know, how can we get past displays and the diversity of specifications. You know, what evidence do we need to make everyone comfortable that we can do all those things that we actually did during the pandemic, but now, you know, the FDA still needs to document and do its due diligence in clearing these devices for those intended uses. And so I think that's going to be a big part of it.
A pragmatic approach, which I think is crucial, is that we need to develop that framework that limits the heterogeneity of assessment of biomarkers in the real world.
Of care, which is a big need. And I believe that the PIcc, the PIcc, can contribute by being a kind of a governance structure, creating those oversights and keeping the oversights. So developing the way to get there and involving the right stakeholders at the right time and connecting them.
I'm really excited about the PIcc in-person meeting and look forward to meeting you in person in Washington, DC area.
Perfect. Thank you so much.